Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are tackling something that trips up people literally all over the world, mapping the British Isles. We're going to finally demystify those often confused terms, England, Britain, and the UK. By peeling back the geographical and political layers, we're going to give you a crystal clear understanding of what these places actually are. Let's get right into it. So let's dive into the core mystery here. England, Great Britain, the UK. Are they just the same thing? You hear them used completely interchangeably all the time, right? On the global news, during the Olympics, just in everyday conversation. But despite what a lot of people think, these three names mean very, very different things. Honestly, the root of our collective confusion stems from a really complex mix of geography, history, and politics. So to truly grasp the differences, we need to think about it in layers, kind of like stacking them up. We're going to start with the absolute smallest political unit and just zoom our way out, layer by layer, until we hit the largest sovereign state. All right, let's start with our foundational layer, England. England is a constituent country that occupies the southern and central portion of the largest island in the region, and it's got London as its capital. But here is the absolutely vital takeaway for this one. England is not a traditional, globally sovereign country on its own. Now, if you're wondering why England seems to completely dominate the conversation, just look at this staggering number, 84%. Over 84% of the entire region's population lives right there within England's borders. So you can totally see why people mistakenly use England as a catch-all term for the whole shebang. But, of course, England is far from alone. Sharing borders with it are two distinct constituent countries, and each of these has its own incredibly rich, deep history, distinct culture, and capital city. Up to the north, we've got Scotland, which is governed locally from Edinburgh, and over to the west lies Wales, with its capital in Cardiff. So what happens when we group these three together? Well, that gives us our second major term, Great Britain. But notice the categorical shift here. Great Britain is not a political country or a government at all. It's a purely geographical term. It strictly refers to the single physical island that contains England, Scotland, and Wales. And just as a piece of geography, it's actually incredibly impressive. Great Britain is the largest island in all of Europe, and get this, it's the 9th largest island in the entire world. So remember, when you say Great Britain, you are strictly talking about the dirt, the rocks, the landmass itself, not the government. Okay, to set up our next political layer, we've got to look west. If we cross the Irish Sea, we hit a second, smaller island, Ireland. Now, politically, this single landmass is actually split right in two. The southern majority is a completely independent nation, the Republic of Ireland. But that northern corner? That belongs to an entirely different category. And that brings us to the crucial point, the United Kingdom. Officially, it's known as the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. This is the actual recognized sovereign state. It's a single political entity made up of 4 constituent nations, England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Grasping the contrast between these two terms is absolutely fundamental to understanding this whole region. Think of it like this. Great Britain is just a geographical landmass, the physical island itself. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom is the political union and sovereign state that sits on top of that island and then extends across the sea to include Northern Ireland. It is quite literally the difference between geography and politics. And since the UK is the sovereign state, it's the entity that actually operates on the global stage. It's the UK that holds a seat at the United Nations, manages the military, and negotiates international treaties. And the central parliament sits right in London, making London the capital of the entire union, not just of England. But the UK doesn't just dictate everything exclusively from London. They use this really fascinating setup called devolution. Basically, power is decentralized. Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland each have their own local parliaments to manage their own domestic, day-to-day laws, stuff like healthcare and education, while London handles the broader, global matters for the whole state. And this brilliantly illustrates how deeply integrated the Union is. Just look at their national symbol, the Union Jack. It's not some random geometric pattern, it's literally a visual assembly. It stitches together the Red Cross of England's St. George, the white saltire of Scotland's St. Andrew, and the red saltire of Ireland's St. Patrick into one beautifully unified design. So let's look at a practical, real-world application of this sovereign state. When citizens travel internationally, they don't carry an England passport or a Scotland passport. No, they hold a United Kingdom passport.
Out on the global stage, they're represented under one single unified nationality: British.
All right, now for what I like to call the rule of exceptions. Because, of course, there's a famous and honestly kind of fun anomaly to everything we just went over. It catches people off guard all the time, and it happens in the world of sports.
In massive international tournaments, think the FIFA World Cup or the Rugby World Cup, that unified UK identity just goes completely out the window. England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland actually compete as entirely separate teams. It's this awesome arena where they revive their ancient historical rivalries and play as individual constituent nations, rather than one big sovereign state.
Okay, let's zoom all the way out now to our final macro layer, the British Isles. This is the absolute largest geographic scale we've got. Like Great Britain, it's a purely geographical term, but this one covers the entire archipelago. It includes both major islands, the independent Republic of Ireland, and all the surrounding waters. And honestly, the sheer scale of this region is staggering. We aren't just talking about two big islands here. The British Isles encompass over 6,000 smaller surrounding islands. We're talking about places like the Isle of Man and the Hebrides. It's just a massive, incredibly crowded network of land masses.
So, how in the world do we keep all of this straight without having a map constantly shoved in our faces? Well, I like to use the nesting doll concept, because when you think about it, all of these terms just fit perfectly inside one another, layer by layer.
Let's quickly review the stack, just so you have a perfectly wrapped takeaway. England is the constituent country, Great Britain is the physical island that England, along with Scotland and Wales, sits on, and the United Kingdom is the sovereign political union that governs all of them, plus Northern Ireland. Simple, structured, and right on the money. Which leaves us with this final, really fascinating thought. Now that you know exactly how these geographical and political borders overlap, how might this change the way you interpret global news, historical events, or even their cultural identity? The next time you hear these names thrown around, you'll know exactly where you are on the map. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll see you next time.